Nicholas Thorne is a rich, rude businessman who's used to getting his way. One night, he yells at a bartender named Ella James in front of a full bar. But Ella doesn't back down. She says 3 words that stop everyone in their tracks, including him. That moment starts something no one saw coming. As their lives cross again and again, Nicholas begins to change, and Ella learns that even the most powerful people have something to prove. This is the story of how a brave female bartender stood up for her rights against a powerful, arrogant millionaire, and the twists and turns that follow are ones you don't want to miss. If this story already has you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe for more powerful true story content, and share this video with someone who believes the truth always finds its way. The Avalon Room was not just a bar, it was a one-of-a-kind bar. Right in the heart of downtown Chicago, it sat on the corner of Michigan Avenue and 11th Street, glowing like a golden secret behind tinted windows. You needed a reservation to sit at the bar, and most of the regulars wore suits worth more than someone's car. The shelves behind the counter were lined with bottles that cost more than rent. Jazz music played low from speakers in the ceiling, the kind that made people speak softly and drink slowly. Everyone knew that Friday night was when Nicholas Thorne walked in. And when he did, the whole room seemed to shift. Conversations dropped to whispers. Staff stood straighter. Even the ice cubes in drinks seemed to stop clinking. Because when Nicholas Thorne walked into the Avalon Room, it felt like the king had arrived in his castle. Nicholas was tall, always in a perfectly pressed dark gray suit with a slim black tie. His shoes were shiny, his cufflinks gold. At 35, he was already one of the richest men in the city. Tech companies, startups, real estate, he had his hands in everything. People called him a genius in public and a monster behind closed doors. He didn't smile unless it was for a camera, and even then, it looked like he was trying hard not to frown. He always sat in the same seat, middle of the bar, first stool from the right. Every time he walked in, Tamara, the bar manager, would give the silent signal, and his usual drink would be ready before he even spoke. Glenfiddich 21, neat. No garnish. No ice. Just whiskey in a crystal glass. He didn't talk to staff unless he was complaining. And he always complained. Loudly. No one dared talk back. But tonight was different. Luis Rivera, the bartender who usually worked Friday nights, had called in sick. His stomach flu was bad, and Tamara didn't want him coughing near customers who owned half the city. So she put Ella James behind the bar instead. Ella had been working at the Avalon Room for 3 months now, mostly Tuesdays and Wednesdays, the slower nights. She was 26, with soft brown eyes, thick curly hair tied back in a bun, and a calm way about her that made customers relax. She worked fast, clean, and didn't let things get to her. She wasn't scared of rude customers. She'd worked at dive bars before this, where things were way worse. Still, Tamara gave her a warning. When Nicholas Thorne comes in, don't make jokes. Don't smile too much. Just serve the drink and walk away. Ella nodded. Got it. Serve and leave. But inside, she was curious. At exactly 7 p.m., Nicholas walked in. Right on time. He didn't look around. He didn't greet anyone. He just went straight to his stool and sat down. Ella was already pouring the Glenfiddich into a clean glass, like she'd been told. She set it down gently in front of him. "Your usual, sir," she said calmly, like it was no big deal. Nicholas didn't even look at her. He took one sip, paused, then looked at the glass. "Did you pour this, or did someone blindfold you and spin you in a circle first?" he said, his voice low but sharp. Ella blinked but didn't react. "That's the Glenfiddich 21, neat." "Just as requested," she replied. Nicholas finally looked at her, like really looked. He didn't recognize this face. She wasn't part of the usual Friday staff. His eyes were cold, narrowed, the way someone might look at a fly buzzing near their dinner plate. "Then you need to be retrained," he said flatly. "This tastes like watered-down garbage." Ella didn't flinch. She didn't roll her eyes or snap back. She simply said, "I'll double-check the bottle, sir," and turned around. Tamara, standing a few feet away, gave her a slight shake of the head. It meant, "Let it go." Ella knew better than to argue with customers like this. But it still burned a little. Not because she was hurt, but because of how normal this seemed to everyone else. No one gasped. No one looked shocked. Everyone was just used to Nicholas Thorne treating people like furniture. And somehow, that felt worse than the insult itself. Later that night, after her shift ended, Ella walked the 4 blocks to her tiny apartment in Bronzeville. It was small but neat, just 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a little kitchen with a leaky faucet. She hung up her apron, made a cup of tea, and sat at her desk. On the wall above it was her dream board, cut-out photos of kids painting, shelves of books, smiling faces in classrooms. In the center, bold letters read, James Youth Arts Center, opening 2026. She wanted to build a place where kids from her neighborhood could learn art and music without having to pay a fortune. She'd been saving for 5 years. Every tip counted. That's why she worked late nights, took double shifts, and shared a wall with neighbors who played loud music until 2 a.m. But it was worth it. She wasn't just working for rent, she was building something bigger. The next Friday came fast. Luis was still sick, so Ella was behind the bar again. This time, she felt ready. She wore the same black shirt and vest as before, hair tucked back, name tag pinned to the left. At 6:55 p.m., she had the Glenfiddich bottle on the counter. She poured it exactly like before. But tonight, she didn't feel invisible. She felt annoyed. She didn't care if Nicholas Thorne had money, power, or owned the building they were standing in. That didn't give him the right to treat people like dirt. At 7 p.m. sharp, he walked in again. This time, he glanced at her. Not long, just enough to show he remembered. He sat down in his usual seat, checked his phone, then reached for the glass already waiting for him. He sipped, then sighed loudly. At least you got it right this time, he said. Ella turned, smiled politely, and said nothing. It didn't end there. Over the next 30 minutes, Nicholas made 4 comments, each one more annoying than the last. He complained that the glass had a spot on it, then said the bar lights were too bright, then told Ella she poured a half-ounce too much. Wasting product, are we? He'd said with a smirk. The final straw came when another customer, an older man in a blue suit, dropped a few dollars on the bar after finishing his drink. Nicholas looked over at Ella and muttered, "Don't get used to that. Real money doesn't come in crumpled bills." Ella stopped cleaning the counter. Her jaw clenched. This wasn't just rudeness, it was arrogance in its purest form. She turned slowly and looked at Nicholas, who was still scrolling on his phone like nothing had happened. Luis had warned her. Tamara had warned her. But right now, Ella didn't care about warnings. She cared about respect. Tamara, who had been quietly watching from the corner, saw Ella step closer to Nicholas's stool. Luis, just walking in from a break, froze mid-step. The regulars sensed something. The jazz music faded into background noise. Ella walked up, stood across from Nicholas, and rested her hand on the bar. Calm. Firm. "Sir," she said clearly. Nicholas looked up, surprised at the tone. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked him right in the eyes and said, "You're not special." The words were soft, but they hit like thunder. The bar went silent. A couple stopped mid-conversation. A fork clinked loudly against a plate. Tamara's eyes went wide. Luis stared. Even the bartender at the far end of the bar looked over. Nicholas blinked. He hadn't expected that. No one ever spoke to him like that. For once, he didn't know what to say. Ella didn't move. She waited. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Nicholas looked stunned, almost confused. Then something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or something else. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Ella didn't wait for them. She turned, picked up an empty glass, and calmly walked back to the sink. The room remained still, the air thick with tension. Tamara took a deep breath, stepped forward, and said to Nicholas, "Your drink is on the house tonight, Mr. Thorne." He didn't answer. He stood, straightened his jacket, placed a $100 bill on the bar, and walked out without another word. As soon as the door closed behind him, the noise slowly returned. Whispers. Side glances. Someone let out a quiet, nervous laugh. Luis walked over to Ella. "You really just said that to Nicholas Thorne?" Ella nodded. "Yep." Luis blinked. "Girl, you either just got yourself fired or became a legend." Later that night, back at home, Ella told her sister Becca everything. Becca was in her last year of college, majoring in journalism. She had always encouraged Ella to stand up for herself. "Wait, you actually said that to him?" Becca said over the phone, half laughing, half gasping. "You told a millionaire he's not special?" Ella smiled into her pillow. "I didn't plan it. It just came out." Becca whistled. "Dang. You've got guts. But be careful. Guys like him, they're used to getting whatever they want." You saying that probably shook him more than you think. Ella thought about that. Nicholas had looked, not angry, but shocked. Like the idea of being ordinary had never occurred to him. Ella didn't know what would happen next. Maybe he'd complain to management. Maybe she'd be fired. Or maybe, just maybe, things were about to get a whole lot more complicated than she ever imagined. The next Friday felt different from the moment Ella walked into the Avalon room. The quiet elegance of the place was the same. The gold lighting, the soft jazz, the polished glass shelves. But there was something in the air now. Staff looked at her with new eyes. Not in a bad way, but with surprise. Maybe even a little respect. Tamara hadn't brought up what happened last week. She hadn't mentioned Nicholas Thorne at all. But Ella could tell everyone was waiting to see what would happen if he returned. Luis was back on shift, though still a bit pale. He bumped Ella's arm gently and whispered, "If Thorne walks in tonight, I got your back. But also, don't poke the bear again, okay?" Ella gave him a half smile. "I don't plan to." Still inside, she felt more steady. She didn't regret what she said. Not one bit. She just hoped she still had a job tomorrow. At 6:55 p.m., Ella was cleaning a shaker when she saw the familiar silhouette walk through the door. Nicholas Thorne, suit pressed, shoes shining, like always. He didn't hesitate or glance around. He walked straight to his usual seat. The room got quieter, like it always did. This time, his eyes went straight to Ella. He looked at her a little longer than usual, but didn't say anything. She walked over with calm steps, carrying a clean crystal glass and the Glenfiddich 21 bottle. "Evening," she said politely. "Your usual?" Nicholas gave a single nod. "Fine." She poured carefully, measured to the ounce, and placed the glass on a square napkin. He took a sip, then leaned back slightly in his stool. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Ella held her breath. Then, in a voice just loud enough for the bar to hear, Nicholas muttered, "Well, at least it tastes like something this time." Ella felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't reply. She just gave a small nod and turned back to wipe the counter. Luis caught her eye and shook his head softly. "Let it go," he seemed to say. She did. For the next 20 minutes, everything stayed quiet. Nicholas sipped his drink and typed on his phone. Ella served other customers, filled ice bins, and restocked straws. Tamara floated in and out of the floor, keeping an eye on things as always. Just after 7:30, a problem came up. A regular named Mr. Hamilton asked for the same Glenfiddich whiskey, but the bottle was empty. Ella checked the back shelf. Nothing. She glanced in the storage fridge. Still nothing. The next closest bottle was Glenlivet 21. Similar taste, same price, even the same kind of bottle. Most people wouldn't notice the difference. It was either that, or tell the customer they were out. She made the call. She poured the Glenlivet for Mr. Hamilton, who took it with a smile and a joke about whiskey shortages. Then, seeing Nicholas's glass nearly empty, she filled a fresh one from the same bottle and placed it beside him. "Here you go," she said with a nod. Nicholas took one sip and froze. He stared at the glass like it had insulted him. Slowly, he turned to look at Ella. "What is this?" His voice was sharp, loud enough for several heads to turn. Ella kept her voice steady. It's Glenlivet 21, sir. We're out of Glenfiddich, but it's the same quality. It's not the same, he snapped, cutting her off. It's not even close. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Or do you just not care? The bar went quiet. The jazz music kept playing, but no one spoke. Ella felt every eye in the room on her. Luis took a step forward, but Tamara held up a hand to stop him. She was watching carefully. Ella took a slow breath. I made a call based on what we had in stock. If you'd prefer something else, I can. You can't follow a simple instruction, that's what, Nicholas barked, standing now. His voice carried across the entire room. This is supposed to be a premium establishment, not a second-rate lounge where bartenders guess what's close enough. Glasses clinked as people froze mid-sip. One man turned fully around in his chair. A couple near the window stopped talking completely. Luis's hands were clenched at his sides. Ella stood still. Her hands didn't shake, but her heart was pounding. She wasn't mad, she was humiliated. Publicly. And she knew this wasn't about the whiskey. This was about control. Nicholas didn't like that she'd stood up to him last week. Now he was reminding everyone who he was. Ella didn't move at first. She let the moment hang in the air. Nicholas was still staring at her, waiting for her to shrink, to apologize, maybe even to beg. But she didn't. She picked up the glass of Glenlivet from the bar and poured it down the drain without saying a word. Then she set the empty glass down and looked at him. If you want Glenfiddich, you'll have to wait until next week. It's on backorder. Nicholas stared. He looked around the room, as if realizing again that everyone was watching. His mouth opened, then closed. Ella continued, her voice calm, even. And if you want someone to yell at, I suggest calling your assistant. Because I don't work for you. The words hit like a slap. For a second, Nicholas looked like he might explode again. But he didn't. He turned, grabbed his coat from the stool, and walked out without another word. As soon as the door shut behind him, the tension broke like a wave. Someone let out a low whistle. A woman at a nearby table said, "Wow." Luis rushed over. "Ella, are you okay?" She nodded, though her hands were just starting to tremble now that it was over. Tamara walked over slowly. She looked Ella in the eyes for a long second. Then she said, "Take a break." Ella thought she was in trouble, but Tamara just pointed toward the hallway. 10 minutes. Then come back. In the break room, Ella sat on a plastic chair and held a paper cup of water. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Becca. Did he show up again? Ella texted back, "Yes. And I might have just pushed my luck." Becca replied with a single emoji, wide eyes and a hand covering its mouth. Ella smiled a little. At least she wasn't alone in this. Back on the bar floor, the atmosphere had changed. Customers were still talking, but now the subject was Ella. She could feel the eyes, the whispers. Not hateful, more like curiosity. Some even smiled at her. Luis was waiting. "He's not gonna let that go, you know," he said quietly. "Guys like that don't take public embarrassment lightly." Ella shrugged. Then he shouldn't embarrass other people. Luis gave her a long look, then nodded. "You're brave. Crazy, but brave." Tamara approached again. "You still want to finish the shift?" Ella nodded. "I'm good." Tamara surprised her by placing a hand on her shoulder. "You kept your cool. That's hard to do with someone like him. Let me know if he shows up again. I'll handle it." That meant a lot coming from Tamara, who didn't hand out praise easily. Ella went back to work. And even though her hands were steady, her mind was racing. When the shift ended, Ella and Luis walked out together into the chilly night. The streets were quieter now. Just a few cars and the sound of late-night traffic. "What do you think he's gonna do?" she asked. Luis shrugged. He could do nothing. He could go full rich guy crazy. Send an email to the owner. Try to get you fired. Or he paused. Or what? Ella asked. Or maybe he won't do anything, Luis said. Maybe you got to him. Twice now. Ella snorted. I doubt it. Luis smiled a little. No one talks to him like that. Maybe it messed with his head. Ella didn't say anything, but deep down, she did wonder. He hadn't yelled because of the whiskey. That much was clear. He could have just sent the drink back. But instead, he chose to shout. It was about something else. Something that started the moment she told him, "You're not special." Back home, Ella sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through her phone. No messages from the bar. No messages from anyone strange. No email from Tamara. That was a good sign. She opened her notebook and stared at the page titled, Steps to Open the Center. She hadn't written anything new in a while, but tonight gave her a strange kind of fuel. She picked up her pen and started jotting down ideas. Grants, local sponsors, volunteer teachers. Her hands still felt warm from the rush of standing up to someone powerful. Not out of anger, but because it mattered. She didn't want to spend her life being quiet just to keep a paycheck. She didn't want to let people like Nicholas Thorne think they could walk all over everyone and never be told no. Whether or not he came back next Friday didn't matter right now. What mattered was that she still felt like herself. Nicholas Thorne stood by the tall windows of his penthouse, watching the lights of Chicago sparkle like stars trapped in glass. From the 47th floor, everything looked small. Cars were ants. People were dots. Even buildings seemed to shrink in the distance. But no matter how high he stood, he couldn't get one voice out of his head. Because I don't work for you. She had said it so calmly, like she wasn't talking to someone with the power to shut down 10 businesses in a day. Nicholas was used to people bending, people apologizing, people pleasing. He was not used to being told no. Especially not in front of a room full of people. Especially not by a bartender. He wasn't angry, not really. He was confused. And the more he replayed the moment in his head, the more he realized he didn't hate it. In fact, he respected it. He poured himself a drink, not the Glenfiddich, just water, and sat on the gray leather couch in the middle of his living room. The space was cold and modern. Polished concrete floors, black furniture, silver accents. It looked like a hotel lobby more than a home. That's how he liked it. Clean, simple, controlled. But tonight, it felt too quiet. Nicholas pulled out his phone and opened a contact file. Ella James, it read. Just her name. No number. No photo. Nothing. His assistant had only managed to find basic details. Age 26. Grew up in Bronzeville. College dropout. No criminal record. Currently working at the Avalon Room. No social media, no press, no drama. Nicholas had read the report 3 times and still couldn't understand why he cared. She wasn't special on paper. But she had done something special. She had looked him in the face and treated him like a man, not a king. He wasn't used to that. Nicholas had built his empire by being sharp, fast, and ruthless. His first company was a software startup he created in a tiny apartment when he was 22. He sold it for 8 figures by 25. By 30, he had 3 more companies and a private investment group. By 35, he had properties, connections, and a reputation that kept most people too nervous to speak freely around him. But Ella had. And not just once. Twice. First, she told him he wasn't special. Then she told him she didn't work for him. Both times, her voice had been steady. Not angry. Not rude. Just clear. And somehow, that shook him more than if she had screamed. Nicholas sipped his water and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She had challenged him in a way no boardroom rival ever had. Not with numbers or lawsuits, but with truth. Unpolished, uncomfortable truth. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ella sat at her desk, flipping through a notebook full of drawings and budget notes. Her apartment smelled like lavender and old paper. A half-eaten peanut butter sandwich sat on a napkin beside her. She was tired, but her mind wouldn't rest. Her notebook was full of plans, some big, some small. There were scribbles about renting a space, asking local artists to volunteer, and applying for grants. Her youth art center was still a dream, but it didn't feel as far away as it used to. Not because she had money, but because she felt stronger, more sure of herself. Standing up to Nicholas hadn't fixed her life, but it reminded her that her voice mattered, even when she was talking to someone richer, louder, and more powerful. That meant something. It reminded her that she wasn't just working to survive, she was working to build. Ella got a text from Becca. "You good?" Ella replied, "All quiet. Just working." Becca responded with a heart emoji and a line that made Ella laugh out loud. "Let me know if he shows up again so I can bring popcorn." Ella shook her head and smiled. She didn't know if Nicholas would return. Part of her thought he might. Not to yell again, but because something had shifted in him. She saw it in his face before he left. He hadn't looked angry. He looked like someone who'd been told a truth they didn't want but needed. Ella didn't hate Nicholas. In fact, she pitied him a little. A man who had everything but couldn't even handle being told no. A man who could buy anything except honest feedback. She wondered what kind of life he had to live to end up like that. Cold, alone, needing control in every room he entered. Back in the penthouse, Nicholas scrolled through old photos on his phone. Most were business events, meetings, ribbon cuttings. People shaking his hand. People laughing at his jokes. All smiles. All fake. The last real photo in his camera roll was from almost a year ago. A blurry shot of him and his brother Sam, sitting on a park bench. They hadn't spoken since. Not after the fight. Not after Nicholas told Sam that being good didn't get you anywhere in this world. Sam had walked away, shaking his head. "You think you've built a kingdom," he'd said, "but all you've built is a cage." Nicholas hadn't understood it then. He was too busy winning. Too busy growing. But tonight, Sam's words made more sense. Because Ella hadn't looked at him like a king. She looked at him like someone who needed to be reminded he was human. And for the first time in years, he listened. The next morning, Nicholas woke early. He made black coffee and sat in front of his home office window. He thought about sending an apology. But how? He didn't even have her number. And besides, what would he even say? Sorry for yelling? Sorry for being used to people kissing my shoes? It all sounded stupid. Instead, he opened a new document on his laptop and typed, "How do you change when no one expects you to?" Then he stopped. His phone buzzed. It was a calendar alert. Quarterly review, 9 a.m., boardroom 18C. Back to business. Back to control. But as he slipped on his jacket and picked up his keys, he paused for one last look in the mirror. He didn't see the same man. Not fully. Something had cracked. And now, he had to figure out what to do with that. He walked out the door, but part of his mind stayed behind, with her. Nicholas had never returned to the same place twice without a reason. But the next Friday night, just before 7, he was back at the Avalon room. He arrived a little earlier than usual and wore a different suit, lighter in color, softer in shape. He noticed it in the mirror before he left his condo. Maybe he was trying not to look like the man who yelled in bars. As he walked into the quiet glow of the room, heads turned, but not in the usual way. People looked, curious this time, not just cautious. Ella was behind the bar again, focused on lining up the wine glasses. Her brown curls were tucked behind her ears, and she wore the same calm expression she always did. When she saw him, her eyes didn't widen. She didn't flinch. She simply nodded once and went back to polishing a glass like he was anyone else. Nicholas sat in his usual stool, but this time, he didn't reach for his phone. Ella didn't rush over. She finished what she was doing, then came over with a clean glass. "Same drink?" she asked, her voice steady. Nicholas nodded. "Yes, please." He paused, then added, "And thank you." Ella looked up briefly, surprised. "For what?" she asked. "For being honest," he said, though his voice was quieter than usual. Ella raised an eyebrow, but didn't reply. She poured the drink and set it down. "Let me know if it's too strong," she said simply. Nicholas smiled, just slightly. "I trust you." She didn't smile back, but she didn't walk away either. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then a customer called for her at the far end of the bar. "Excuse me," she said, and turned. Nicholas watched her go. There was something about the way she moved. Calm, sure. He wasn't used to it. Luis, drying glasses nearby, leaned over. "Back again?" he asked. Nicholas nodded. "I am." Luis didn't hide his doubt. "Don't suppose you're here just for the whiskey." Nicholas looked at him and smiled slightly. "Maybe not." Luis chuckled. "Well, don't break her. She's the good kind." Nicholas nodded slowly. "I know." That night passed differently. Nicholas didn't complain once. He didn't bark orders. He didn't correct the temperature of his drink. He sat quietly, watching people, checking emails, sipping slowly. Ella stayed professional. She didn't avoid him, but she didn't engage more than necessary. Still, there was a moment, late in the shift, when things slowed down. Only 3 tables remained. Luis stepped out for a break. The jazz music turned soft. And for the first time, Ella leaned slightly against the bar and said, "So, what exactly do you do anyway? Besides yelling at bartenders and collecting overpriced whiskey." Nicholas let out a short laugh. "I build companies. Mostly tech. Apps, data systems, a few investments." Ella nodded. "Sounds complicated." "Sometimes," he said. "Other times it's just people pretending to be smarter than they are." Ella smiled faintly. "And do you like it?" Nicholas thought for a moment. "I like winning," he said. "But I'm not sure I like the game anymore." Ella didn't push further. She wiped the counter slowly. "What about you?" Nicholas asked. "This can't be your end goal." Ella shook her head. "It's not. I want to open a community arts center. For kids. A place where they can create without worrying about money or space or being in danger." Nicholas blinked. "That's noble." "No," Ella said, "it's necessary. There aren't many places like that in my neighborhood." Nicholas studied her. "You don't think small, do you?" Ella looked him right in the eye. "I don't have the time to." A few nights later, Nicholas came back again. Then again the following week. Each time, he sat a little longer. Spoke a little softer. He even nodded at Luis once, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Staff noticed. Customers noticed. People started whispering. "That's the billionaire," they'd say. "Why's he talking to the bartender?" Ella noticed too, but she didn't change how she acted. She stayed the same, calm, respectful, clear. One night, a drunk customer started raising his voice at her. Nothing violent, just rude and loud. Nicholas stood up without a word, walked over, and placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "That's enough," he said calmly. The man turned, saw who it was, and backed off quickly. Nicholas didn't gloat. He just walked back to his seat. Ella brought him his drink without a word. But she looked at him a little longer that time. Not as a threat, but as someone human. Later that night, Ella and Luis cleaned up together. Luis looked at her sideways. "So, are you going to pretend he's not growing on you?" Ella laughed. "He's not growing on me." "You let him talk more than most," Luis said. "That's because he's been quiet lately." Luis said, unconvinced. "Just be careful. Guys like that, they pull you in without meaning to." Ella nodded. She knew what Luis meant. It wasn't about falling for the money. It was about lowering your guard around someone who seemed like they were changing. And maybe Nicholas was. But Ella wasn't the type to jump into anything blindly. She had too much at stake. Her center, her future, her peace. Still, there was a moment in that same week when she and Nicholas were both reaching for a glass at the same time, and their fingers brushed. Neither of them pulled away right away. That meant something. One quiet night, near closing time, Nicholas stayed behind after the last customer left. Ella was cleaning up, stacking glasses. He didn't say anything until she was wiping down the bar near him. "Dinner," he said suddenly. She looked up. "Excuse me." "Dinner," he repeated. "With me. Not here. Somewhere quiet. Just a conversation. No business." Ella raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me out?" Nicholas looked serious. "I'm inviting you to talk. Over a meal. You can call it whatever you want." Ella looked at him, unsure. She wasn't afraid of him. But this wasn't just about food. It was about trust. It was about letting him into her life, even a little. After a pause, she said, "I don't date people who yell at bartenders." Nicholas smiled. "I'm trying not to be that person anymore." Ella held his gaze. "Trying's not enough. Come back when you've changed, not while you're figuring it out." Nicholas stood, placed a $100 tip on the bar, and nodded once. "Fair enough." Then he left. Ella watched him go, heart a little tight in her chest. Not because she was scared, but because she wasn't sure who he really was yet. She hoped he wasn't playing a game. She hoped the change she saw in him was real. But she had learned long ago not to trust pretty words without proof. Her father had made promises too, before he lost everything chasing investments that went nowhere. Her mother had trusted him, and when he failed, the whole family paid the price. Ella had built her life on truth and independence since then. She wasn't about to throw it away just because a rich man started acting polite. Still, there was a part of her that hoped he would prove her wrong. That maybe, just maybe, Nicholas Thorne was more than the name he carried. Nicholas didn't show up at the Avalon room for 5 days after Ella turned down his dinner invitation. But he wasn't avoiding her. He was planning. In his downtown office, Nicholas sat at his desk and stared at a folder titled James Youth Arts Center Proposal. He had stayed up late reviewing everything his assistant could find: zoning maps, grant programs, local youth stats, even community outreach strategies. The more he read, the more impressed he was. Ella wasn't just a bartender with a dream. She was organized, focused. She had handwritten notes on volunteer plans and budget spreadsheets made by herself. Nicholas leaned back and thought, she's doing this with almost nothing. What would she build if someone backed her properly? That thought stayed with him as he opened his calendar and blocked out an afternoon to meet with his legal team. If he was going to offer her help, it had to be on her terms. Ella was back at work that same evening, wiping down the bar while Luis refilled lemons. Things had felt quiet since her last talk with Nicholas. Not just because he hadn't returned, but because a strange sense of waiting hung in the air. Like something was coming, but no one knew what. Ella didn't talk about him anymore. Not to Luis. Not to Becca. Not even to herself. She tried to stay focused on her shifts and on her notebook at home. But her thoughts drifted. Had he walked away for good? Or was he thinking? Regrouping? She wasn't sure what she expected, but when Tamara walked up to her mid-shift with a beige envelope, she was caught completely off guard. "Guy in a suit dropped this off," Tamara said. "Said it was for you. Looked important." Ella opened it, slowly. Inside was a letter, typed and signed, Nicholas Thorne. And at the top, the words, "Proposal for support." The letter was short but detailed. It said Nicholas wanted to offer support for her youth center through a formal partnership. He wrote that she would not owe him anything personally, but he'd like to invest in her vision by giving her a temporary consulting role at his foundation. It would come with a 3-month trial, a fair salary, and access to funding resources. It also said, "This isn't a gift. It's a bridge. You're building something that matters. I want to help you cross." Ella stared at the paper for a long time. Luis peeked over her shoulder. "Is that real?" he asked. Ella nodded slowly. "It looks real." "You gonna take it?" he asked. Ella folded the letter neatly and tucked it back into the envelope. "I don't know yet," she said. But her heart was racing. Not because of the money, but because he had actually listened, and moved carefully this time. That night, she sat with Becca in their tiny kitchen. Becca was home for the weekend from school and was already halfway through a bowl of cereal. Ella slid the envelope across the table. "From Nicholas," she said. Becca opened it and read quietly. After a minute, she looked up. "Okay, wow. This is serious." Ella nodded. "I know. What do you think?" Becca asked. "I think he's trying," Ella said. "But I don't know if I trust it yet." Becca stirred her cereal slowly. "You don't have to trust him to trust yourself," she said. "You'd still be in charge of your dream, right?" Ella nodded again. "It's just, I've never accepted help like this. And definitely not from someone like him." Becca smiled. "Maybe that's the challenge. Knowing when help isn't a trap." Ella thought about that. She didn't feel trapped. But she felt watched. If she took this offer, a lot of eyes would follow. The next day, Ella called Nicholas's office and accepted the meeting he had offered in the letter. They met in a quiet corner of his company's building, a glass-walled conference room with no assistants, no distractions. Just the two of them and a table with coffee and folders. Nicholas was calm, dressed less sharply than usual. He listened as Ella asked every question she had. "I don't want you owning this project," she said plainly. "I don't want your name on it. This isn't about press." Nicholas nodded. "I understand. My offer is to fund and support, not to control." "Why me?" Ella asked. "Because you're not afraid to tell the truth," he said. "And I think Chicago needs more places like the one you want to build." Ella looked at him, her face unreadable. 3 months. "That's all I'll commit to." "That's all I ask," Nicholas said. And with that, the deal began. For the next few weeks, Ella split her time between bar shifts and meetings with the foundation team Nicholas had assembled. It wasn't what she expected. The people were kind, smart, and open to her ideas. No one treated her like she didn't belong. Nicholas didn't hover, either. He showed up when needed but stayed out of the way. He answered questions, reviewed budgets, and only gave opinions when asked. Ella started to see a different side of him, a side that didn't need control, only clarity. He asked about the kids she hoped to help, about the neighborhood, about what art had meant to her growing up. She shared stories about her dad's sketchbooks, about painting on the back of cereal boxes, about how creativity saved her when the world felt too loud. Nicholas didn't interrupt. He just listened. And sometimes, when she wasn't looking, he smiled. Not in power, but in peace. One evening, they were the last two in the office, surrounded by rolled-up blueprints and sticky notes. Ella laughed about something, an old story from a middle school art class, and Nicholas leaned back, watching her. There was a pause. A soft, still kind of silence. Then, without thinking, he said, "You know, I haven't laughed like this in years." Ella looked at him and tilted her head. "Why not?" "Too busy chasing something," he said. "Didn't know how far I was running until I stopped." Ella nodded slowly. "Happens to a lot of people. Some never stop running." Nicholas met her eyes. "You make me want to stop." The air felt different. Warmer. But Ella looked away first. "We still have a lot of work to do," she said. And with that, the moment passed. But it stayed with them, quiet, real, and waiting to return. Later that week, Becca stopped by the bar to visit Ella. She leaned on the counter, watching her sister pour drinks with her usual calm rhythm. "So," Becca said, "how's your billionaire project, partner?" Ella laughed under her breath. "He's trying. And surprisingly helpful." Becca grinned. "You like him?" "I like that he's not acting like a jerk anymore," Ella said. "That's a start." Luis came over and joined the conversation. "I still don't trust him," he said. "People like that know how to act like they've changed." Ella nodded. "I know. That's why I'm not falling for words." "Good," Luis said. "Because I've seen how fast people switch up once they get what they want." Ella looked at both of them. "He hasn't gotten anything from me yet." But even as she said it, she felt something shift inside. Something deeper. Something she didn't want to admit, not yet. The next time she saw Nicholas, He showed her a small piece of land near the south side, an empty lot with an old building that could be turned into something new. "It's not in perfect shape," he said, "but with the right work, it could be yours. The foundation could help lease it to your name." Quietly, Ella walked through the dusty halls, imagining murals on the walls and kids laughing in the rooms. "It's perfect," she whispered. Nicholas stood beside her. "Then it's yours. If you want it." Ella didn't answer right away. She walked to a cracked window and looked outside. Then she turned back. "You keep surprising me." "I hope that's a good thing," he said. "We'll see," she replied, but her voice was softer now, less guarded. And as they walked out of the building, the silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was something else. Something waiting to grow. By the time Ella stepped into the bar for her evening shift, she could feel it. Something had changed. Tamara wasn't at her usual post near the entrance. Luis barely looked up from slicing lemons. And a few customers who usually nodded politely when she passed looked away instead. The warmth she'd gotten used to over the last few weeks had cooled. Like someone had turned the temperature down without touching the thermostat. Ella moved behind the bar, tying her apron slowly, her eyes scanning the room. "What's going on?" she finally asked Luis. He didn't answer right away. Just handed her the lemon tray and said, "You should probably talk to Tamara when she gets back." Ella narrowed her eyes. "What happened?" Luis gave her a look that said, "You already know." Her chest tightened. This wasn't about a spilled drink or a scheduling mix-up. This was something bigger. Something personal. Tamara appeared half an hour later. She didn't greet Ella with her usual nod or soft smile. Instead, she walked straight to the end of the bar and motioned for Ella to follow. In the office, the door closed behind them with a soft click. Tamara leaned against the desk and crossed her arms. "You've been in the papers," she said flatly. Ella blinked. "What?" Tamara pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward her. There it was, a headline from a local lifestyle blog. "Tech Tycoon funds secret community project and grows close with local bartender." Underneath, a photo, not of Ella's face, but of her walking beside Nicholas near the empty building on the south side. The article went on to talk about Nicholas's surprising partnership and hinted at a personal connection. Ella felt her stomach drop. "I didn't talk to anyone," she said. "I swear." Tamara nodded. "I believe you. But now everyone's talking." Ella stood there, unsure what to say. Tamara sighed and softened her tone. "I'm not mad, Ella. But this place runs on reputation. Quiet, upscale, private. People come here to drink in peace, not to see someone from the tabloids pouring their scotch." "So what does that mean?" Ella asked slowly. "It means I've had 3 regulars already ask if Nicholas is coming tonight, and not in a good way. Some are nervous. Some are nosy. Some think you're just here because of him." "That's not true," Ella said. "I've worked hard. I earned this job." "I know that," Tamara said, "but not everyone does. And now your name's out there, tied to his. People talk. People assume." Ella swallowed hard. "Are you firing me?" "No," Tamara said. "But I'm moving you to weekdays. No more Friday or Saturday nights, at least for now." Ella stared. "That's the best shift." Tamara nodded. "I know. But right now, I have to protect the room." The words stung more than Ella expected. She left the office with her shoulders tight, her hands clenched into fists. Luis watched her quietly as she returned to the bar. "So?" he asked. "I've been bumped to weekday shifts," she said, her voice flat. "Because of a headline I didn't write." Luis winced. "That's not fair." "No," Ella said, "it's not." But fairness had never been promised in this life. She finished her shift quietly, speaking only when she had to. When she got home, she tossed her apron on the chair and sat at her desk. Her notebook sat open to a page about community grants, but the words blurred. She reached for her phone, hesitated, then called Becca. You saw the article, didn't you? Ella asked. Yeah, Becca said. It's all over my feed. Are you okay? Ella took a breath. They moved me off weekends. Said I was too visible. Becca didn't reply right away. Finally, Becca said, You didn't do anything wrong, Elle. I know, Ella said. But it still feels like I did. People love a story, Becca said. And when you're standing next to a rich man, they start writing their own chapters. Ella leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. I just wanted to build something good. I didn't ask to be a headline. Then don't let it change the story, Becca said. You're still the same person who's been saving for 5 years. This doesn't erase that. Ella nodded, even though she didn't fully believe it yet. After they hung up, she opened her email. A message from Nicholas was waiting. Saw the article. Let me know if you want to talk. She stared at it for a full minute before closing her laptop. She didn't respond. Not yet. Because part of her didn't know if she wanted to hear his voice right now. Nicholas, on the other hand, was furious. At the blog, at the photographer, at the assistant who'd likely leaked it, and mostly at himself. He had spent years keeping his personal life locked away, and now it had spilled into the one part of someone else's world that wasn't about him. He paced his office, rereading the article, picking apart every word. They had twisted something honest into something tabloid-worthy. They made Ella look like a side project, like she was lucky to have his attention instead of someone with a vision of her own. Nicholas had tried to be careful, but clearly not careful enough. He called his PR team, demanded the article be taken down, but they said it was too late. It had already been picked up by other blogs and reshared 100 times. The damage was done. Now all he could do was wait, and hope Ella didn't walk away for good. The next time he saw her, it wasn't planned. He was touring the renovation site for her youth center with the construction manager when he saw her car pull up. She stepped out, holding a clipboard, her expression unreadable. Nicholas walked over, slower than usual. Hey, he said. Hey, she replied. You okay? He asked. She looked at him for a long second. No, but I will be. Nicholas nodded. I didn't leak that article. I know, she said. But your name comes with attention. And attention comes with cost. I didn't mean for this to hurt you, he said. I wanted to help. You did help, she said. But now people think I'm just some charity case you picked up along the way. Nicholas frowned. You're not. I know that, Ella said, but they don't. And now I have to work twice as hard to prove it. He didn't argue. He just nodded. They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of hammers echoing in the background. Then Ella said, This center, my center, has to stand on its own. It can't just be another one of your investments. Then I'll make sure it doesn't look like one, Nicholas said. You'll have full ownership. Full credit. I'll stay behind the scenes. And if the press comes again? Ella asked. Then I'll tell them the truth, he said. That I'm not the hero in this story. You are. Ella finally smiled, though it was small. Good. Because I didn't need saving. I just needed space. Nicholas nodded again. Then I'll make sure you get it. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't flowers or promises. But it was enough for Ella to take a step closer, clipboard still in hand. We're still on schedule, she said, glancing at the building. If nothing else breaks, we could open by summer. Let's make it happen, Nicholas replied. 2 weeks after the article blew up, things were just beginning to settle again. Ella was still working weekday shifts at the Avalon Room, and though the energy wasn't quite the same, it had stopped feeling icy. Customers weren't whispering as much, and Tamara had even given her a nod of approval when the bar ran smoothly on a busy Tuesday. The youth center project was picking up speed too. Ella had begun meeting with community organizers, artists, and even a few local teachers who were eager to volunteer. The old building was being gutted and refitted with clean, open rooms. Nicholas kept his distance, like he promised, only checking in through email or sending brief messages through the project team. Ella appreciated that. She liked space. But part of her also missed his presence. She told herself that was just normal. People get used to people. That didn't mean anything deeper. Or so she thought. One morning, Ella was walking out of a hardware store with paint samples and lighting catalogs when her phone buzzed with a message from Becca. It only had 2 words, "Oh no." Ella frowned and called immediately. "What happened?" Becca sounded tense. "You need to check the news." Ella pulled out her phone and searched Nicholas's name. Within seconds, her heart dropped. A video was spreading fast. It showed Nicholas in a heated argument outside a private fundraiser. He was shouting at a city official, angry about building delays and red tape. The clip was short, shaky, and out of context, but damaging. People were sharing it everywhere with captions like, "Here's the real Nicholas Thorne." Ella stood still on the sidewalk, trying to breathe. It wasn't just the video. It was the comments. People were connecting it to her, to the youth center, saying things like, "Is this who's funding your project?" The mess had started again. By the time she arrived at the center site, the project manager looked uneasy. "We've had 3 calls already," he said. "Volunteers asking if this is still safe to be part of." A couple of parents pulled their interest too. Ella ran a hand through her hair. "All from a video." "People don't need full stories anymore," he said. "Just 10 seconds and a loud voice." She spent the rest of the day answering questions, sending calming messages, and walking the halls of the building over and over just to keep her mind clear. Around 5 p.m., she sat down on an overturned paint bucket and stared at the exposed beams. This was supposed to be about the kids, about the art, about healing. But once again, someone else's drama was dragging it down. She hated that feeling, being tied to someone else's shadow, no matter how far she tried to step away from it. Nicholas didn't reach out that night. Or the next. Ella wasn't sure if he was avoiding her, or just trying to stay out of the way like before. But this time felt different. The story had taken a turn. Not just because of the shouting, but because people were now questioning his motives again. What kind of man he was, what kind of strings were attached to his help. Some questioned Ella too. A local blog hinted that she was another young woman pulled into a rich man's circle. It wasn't cruel, but it was enough to sting. Luis handed her the link while they were restocking bottles. "You're not gonna like it," he warned. She skimmed it quickly, then put her phone down. "I'm not what they say," she said. Luis nodded. "I know that. But sometimes it doesn't matter what's true. It just matters what people believe." Ella didn't reply. She knew he was right. 2 days later, Nicholas finally showed up. He didn't come with a suit or a driver. He walked into the nearly empty youth center wearing jeans, a plain hoodie, and sneakers that were already dusty from the construction. Ella was in the back room painting test swatches on the wall. When she saw him, she didn't smile. "You made a mess," she said. Nicholas nodded. "I know. People are pulling out. They think I'm part of your world now, some accessory you bring out when the cameras are off." "That's not what this is," he said. "Then why didn't you speak up?" Ella asked. "You let them talk. You let the story twist again, and you said nothing." Nicholas walked slowly into the room. "Because if I speak, it feeds the fire. If I defend myself, they'll say I'm controlling the story. If I stay quiet, they say I'm hiding." Ella stared at him. "So you just gave up?" Nicholas looked tired. Not physically, but worn. Like someone who had carried too many things too long. "I don't know how to win without people thinking I cheated," he said. "I thought if I gave quietly, it would be enough. I thought this time, it wasn't about me." Ella crossed her arms. "But it is about you. Because your name comes first. Your voice is louder. And whether you like it or not, everything you touch becomes a story." "And I didn't want your story to get lost in mine," he said quietly. That made her pause. For a long moment, they just stood there. Then Ella said, "So what now?" Nicholas looked around the room, at the half-painted walls, the unopened art supplies, the signs of something being born. "Now," he said, "we fix it. Together. You tell your truth. I'll tell mine. Separately, but side by side. Ella didn't nod, but she didn't walk away either. Over the next week, Ella stepped into a role she hadn't planned for, spokesperson. She gave her first ever radio interview about the youth center, focusing only on the mission, the art, the kids. She refused to talk about Nicholas. When asked, she simply said, "This center is about community, not headlines." The same week, Nicholas published a personal letter on his company's website, owning his mistakes and clarifying his role in the project. He wrote, "My name may have helped fund the walls, but the soul of this place belongs to Ella James. I'm just one supporter among many." The post went viral in a new way. Not because of drama, but because of honesty. Slowly, people started to come back. Parents re-signed their kids up. Volunteers returned. Donations came in from places Ella had never heard of. The center was breathing again. Not perfectly, but with strength. And this time, the story was different. Late one evening, Ella sat alone on the floor of what would soon be the art room. She looked around at the drying paint, the shelves being installed, the sunlight still sneaking through the window. She pulled out her notebook and wrote one sentence at the top of a clean page. It survived. That's when she heard footsteps. Nicholas stood in the doorway, holding a small box. "What's that?" she asked. "Something that belonged to my brother," he said. "He used to teach music classes before he moved out of the city." He opened the box and revealed a set of gently worn harmonicas, each one labeled with a student's name. He always said you don't need perfect tools to make something beautiful. Ella picked up one of the harmonicas and turned it in her hand. "We'll use them," she said. "Good," Nicholas replied. "Because they were meant to be heard again." The day of the youth center's soft opening arrived with a light breeze and a clear sky. It wasn't a grand public event, no red carpet, no news cameras, just a quiet celebration with the people who mattered. Local families, artists, volunteers, and a few city organizers gathered outside the building, now painted with a colorful mural that wrapped around the front entrance. The mural showed kids dancing, painting, and holding hands under a tree with roots shaped like musical notes. It was the kind of art that made people stop and smile. Ella stood on the front steps, holding a clipboard, making sure everything was in place. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair pinned back, and her eyes brighter than anyone had ever seen them. The youth center wasn't a dream anymore, it was real. And even though it wasn't finished, it was ready to open its doors. Inside, the rooms buzzed with quiet excitement. Volunteers gave small tours, showing the new art supplies, the music room with soundproof panels, the reading nook lined with donated books. Kids peeked into each room like they were stepping into a new world. Ella moved through the space with purpose, answering questions, shaking hands, and welcoming each person like they were already part of something bigger. Becca stood near the art room, grinning. "You did it," she whispered when Ella passed. Ella smiled, but didn't stop moving. There was too much to do. Every detail mattered. She wanted the kids to feel safe, inspired, and seen. And even though she didn't say it out loud, she felt it in her chest. This is what I was made to build. Around noon, Nicholas arrived. He didn't wear a suit. Just a navy shirt and slacks, sleeves rolled up, hands tucked in his pockets. He didn't speak at first. He just watched. Ella noticed him standing quietly near the mural. She walked over slowly, clipboard still in hand. "You made it," she said. Nicholas nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. The building spoke louder than words. He glanced around, his eyes pausing on the music room window. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's necessary," Ella replied. "You helped make it possible." Nicholas looked at her then, more serious. "I didn't come to be praised." Ella tilted her head. "Then why did you come?" He hesitated, then said, "To tell you something." "Okay," she said, still calm. "I've been thinking a lot," he started. "About all the noise. The mess. The things I let happen because I was too afraid to lose control." Ella waited. He stepped closer. I've spent so much of my life trying to be right, rich, respected, when the truth is, I didn't even know who I was becoming." He paused. His eyes didn't leave hers. "But then I met you. And you were different. Not because you challenged me, but because you saw through me. No one's ever done that." Ella's breath caught slightly, but she didn't interrupt. Nicholas continued. "I didn't come here today just to see the center. I came because I needed to say something. Something simple." The space between them felt small now. Not just physically, but emotionally. Like two people who had crossed a long bridge and were finally standing on the same side. Nicholas looked into her eyes, and in a soft but certain voice said, "I choose you." Ella blinked. She hadn't expected that, not in those words. Not in that way. "What?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "I choose you," Nicholas repeated. "Not the story. Not the image. Not the project. Just you. As you are. No games. No expectations. I want to be in your world, if you'll let me." Ella looked at him for a long moment. Not as a billionaire. Not as a project partner. Just as a man. And she realized something. She believed him. Not because of his words, but because of the silence behind them. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to win. He was simply telling the truth. Finally. Slowly, she stepped forward, resting her clipboard against her side. "I don't need saving," she said. "I know. I don't need a hero." "I don't want to be one," he said. She let that settle. Then said, "You still have work to do." Nicholas smiled. "I plan to keep working. On myself. On us, if you're willing." Ella studied his face. The lines that used to hold tension now held softness. The man who once barked orders from a bar stool now stood quietly, waiting for permission to stay. And for the first time, she nodded. "Okay." They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. They just stood together, two people finally meeting in the middle. Around them, the youth center buzzed with life. Laughter from the art room. Music drifting from the speakers. Children's footsteps running down the hall. It was loud, but in the best way. And through it all, Ella and Nicholas stood calm in the middle of it, like the storm had passed and left something better in its place. Becca walked by and caught Ella's eye, raising her brows. Ella just smiled and shook her head slightly. Later, when the soft opening ended, Nicholas stayed to help clean up. He wiped tables, carried boxes, and loaded paint cans without being asked. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. That night, as Ella closed the doors and turned off the lights, she looked back one more time at the mural. She saw herself in it now, standing strong at the roots. Weeks passed, and the center officially opened with full classes. Kids from all over the South Side signed up. There were painting workshops, songwriting circles, and Saturday movie nights. Nicholas stayed involved, but behind the scenes. He kept his promise. He helped fund what needed funding and never asked for his name to be on the door. Ella's name, however, was everywhere. On the sign out front. On the wall of donors. On the lips of every parent who walked through the doors. She had become something more than a bartender, more than a dreamer. She was a builder. A leader. A reminder that strength doesn't come from shouting, but from showing up. And Nicholas? He changed, too. Slowly, quietly. He started mentoring young tech entrepreneurs in underfunded neighborhoods. He showed up to meetings in sneakers instead of suits. He stopped chasing press and started chasing purpose. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was enough. One quiet evening, Nicholas and Ella walked side by side down a nearby park trail. It was late, the sky dusky and soft. Birds chirped from the trees, and the city hummed quietly in the background. They didn't say much, just enjoyed the peace. Then, after a long silence, Ella said, "I think I figured it out." "What's that?" Nicholas asked. "The 3 words," she replied. He stopped walking and turned toward her. "The ones that freeze everything?" She nodded. "Yes." "And he asked. Ella smiled and stepped closer. I believe you. Nicholas's eyes softened. He didn't ask for anything more. He didn't need to. In those 3 words, she gave him the one thing he'd never been able to buy: trust. Pure, earned, and honest. And in that quiet, simple moment, surrounded by nothing but air and evening light, they finally became what neither of them had planned for: something real. Something whole. Something free.